Hi folks, we're back again today. It is the 25th of March and beautiful sunny day, and so we'll try and carry on. I hope everybody is doing well. So today we're going to talk about surface preparation, sandpaper, and some of the sanding machines that we use. I've got a few samples here that I brought in, and hopefully we can work our way through some of this stuff. So a number of things that we want to consider when we are trying to figure out what sanding level we need to go to, the quality of the sanding, what has to be done in order to prep that project before we hit the finishing room. So we've talked about this many times, not necessarily from me, but from other instructors in the finishing room and in some of your other courses. They talk about the importance of sanding, and we can't stress that enough. Sanding will make or break any project. A good project that is well built and you've done a really nice job in the machining, if you don't follow through with a good sanding job, you can destroy it. You can, the finish will not turn out the way that you would like if you don't do a decent job on the finish. On the other side of that, you could do a very poor job of manufacturing and do a really great job in the finishing, and you can make a project actually look better by doing a good job in your sanding. Quite often, we actually like to mark projects after the finishing has been applied, because the defects, they show better. The defects are not always visible. The flaws, the nicks, the dents, the scratches, the tear out, and so on, the saw marks, they're not always visible until after you put that finish on. So these are the things that you need to pay attention to, need to watch for. It is possible to oversand. Oversanding on edges and stuff, you can destroy profiles very quickly. Proper sanding depends on the species of wood and the type of finish you want. The finish can be unfinished in the wood or on the wood. So a good example of that, if a finish is in the wood, that means it's a wipe stain or some type of a penetrating stain, or a finish that's on the wood would be a paint, would be a shader or a toner or something like that, that you're adding color on top of the wood. You're not actually allowing it to penetrate through. So what are we looking for when we're doing our whitewood? We're looking for machine marks, knife marks, and so on. The better the grade of the knife marks, the easier the sanding will be. And we've gone through that with our molder operation, shapers, and so on. We're looking for knife marks per inch. So the quality of the machining has a direct impact on how much sanding you have to do. Tear out is often repaired with sanding or fill. Ideally, we try to avoid that tear out. We can use backer blocks on the shapers, on the table saws, to reduce that tear out. There's lots of ways that you can make your job a whole lot easier in the machining process. Burning of the surface. This is really an unknown, an issue that people don't really give enough credit to, and that is the amount of damage that you do when a board gets stuck inside a machine. The cutter head continues to spin in one spot and it burns, and that burn can often penetrate fairly deep, and it can be quite difficult to get those marks out by sanding. So how do you avoid that? Well, you make sure your machines are set up properly, you have consistent feeding systems, and you just avoid those stoppages. Machine handling during machining, or handling the material while you are machining. Chips, dents, transportation bumps, and storage results. If you're in my shop class this year, many times I've handed people a whisk broom or just a brush or something to brush the dust off between each machining operation, because when you start adding panels one on top of the other with sawdust in the middle, you're actually adding dents into the wood, which is going to create more work for you later on when you do your white wood prep. Proper amounts of glue, not excessive glue squeeze out and so on. That also can add extra labor for you. There are products out there that we use for tinting glue. We don't use them at the school, but I remember working in industry where we would dye the glue a dark brown, or now they're adding in a UV component to be used under black lights. They dye the glue pink for higher visibility. And the reason why we want to find that glue is because anywhere there's glue on the surface, that stain, the top coat, is not going to penetrate into the wood. The glue is going to stand out. So we need to get that off. A common question that I get is, when's the best time to remove that glue? Do you let it dry and take it off by a chisel or use a scraper? I like to take it off when it's wet. I'll take a damp cloth, I'll wipe the joints clean, make sure there's no glue on the surface, and I'll wipe them the second time and use a clean cloth the second time to make sure that glue is off the surface. But I find by doing that, I have to go back and resand, because we're adding moisture back to the surface and that affects the fibers. So these are kind of things that you learn over time working with glues and just going into the finishing room. As far as repairs, what are we looking for? We got minor dents, we got cracks, we got large cracks. Larger cracks, we're going to fill them in with burn-in stick. Minor cracks, we'll fill them in with surface putty. Minor dents, we steam them out with an iron and a damp cloth. Broken or chipped veneer, we try to cut those parts out of a veneered panel. We can replace them and try to patch them up that way. Broken corners, quite often they're very difficult to repair. It's easier just to get out the epoxy putty and square those corners back up and file them and so on. Quite often you'll have to get a file out to square those corners up, because epoxy is very difficult to sand. I know that we're getting short on time here, so I'm going to move on to the next set of slides here on the next video.